Brother Corey again. It's
The
been a
Corey.
while.
It has been a while. We were saying yesterday how long it's been since we did the podcast, and although it feels like a few weeks, it's actually been a year and a half since the last recording, which is crazy because it feels like so much has happened since.
A lot has happened indeed. And what's even stranger is the fact that a year feels so short.
Hmm.
Yet again, it is quite long if you think about it. There's a lot of stuff that has happened in your life. There's a lot happened in my life as well, both good and both bad. And you live through it and you learn your lessons and everything like that. But there's many things that we're both proud of. There's a lot of achievements that we've achieved since we last spoke, and I'm excited to talk about them.
Absolutely, man. So I always think of this every time a new year comes around. You think that weeks go really fast and months go by really fast, but when you actually think of it day by day, sometimes days feel like they go on forever. And then you think, God, that week went by really fast. But then you remember how much you can get done in a day and how much you can actually do in a week. And then how much you can get done and how much can change in your life in a month, 30 days, when you actually move with intent and you do things intentionally. And then you look back on the past year and you think, I'm literally a completely different person, even though it feels like it's gone so fast. But you forget how much you can actually do in your days when you move with intention. And I think we were both pretty similar when we were like 16, 17, maybe even like 15, 16, doing exams at school. We were out on our BMXs. Time just seemed to fly by because we didn't really have anything to do. We didn't know what we were doing. Whereas now, as we're building things and we're doing things where time sort of, like we said, as it goes fast at a larger scale, when you plan your day out, you can do so much in a 24-hour period.
You can, and it compounds. I know it's going to sound
Yeah.
cliche, and it always does when obviously you see it online, see it on Instagram and everywhere. But compounding really does have an effect when you look at it in 2 years' time, 5 years' time.
Hmm.
And it goes back to that conversation we had earlier on last month when we sat down and had coffee. And I said, Jack, look at your phone and look at where you were 2 years ago. Look at where you were 5 years ago. Look at where you were
Yeah.
10 years ago. And that's a good measure to really see how far you've progressed, what you've done, and whether you are close to your main goal or some of your goals than you were before. And it's just a nice way of reflecting and saying, oh, actually, although in this moment in time, it doesn't feel like there's much progress being made, even though I am working towards it, let's have a look back 2 years ago. And I'm a big believer in 2 year cycles. So we'll get
Yeah.
into that later on and how obviously we've both evolved as part of our 2 year cycle that we're currently in now, because we've only just
Got my
started
glasses on.
another one.
Yeah.
So we've both just started
Yes.
a new 2 year cycle, which is so fucking exciting. Um, and yeah, it just all evolves in 2 year cycles. That's what I will always say is don't look back at yourself a year ago or 6 months ago. Like, yeah, it's good to reflect, obviously, how far you've come towards your own goals, but everything happens in 2 year cycles that is significant or of significance in your life.
It really does. It goes back to the time thing. It's almost like as long as a year is and how much can change in a year, on a larger, grander scale, a year's also hardly anything. Like the fact that we talk about these 2 year cycles where like, yeah, this can happen in a year, but so much can happen in 2 years. And as he has just said, we were looking at our 2 year cycle. So for example, from 2020 to 2022, from 22 to 24, and then from 24 to now, and obviously we're now in a fresh 2 year cycle. When we looked back on those photos, we sort of, me and you, we both have very high standards for ourselves in terms of how we want to be and what we want to achieve. And we often can sort of look down on ourselves and kick ourselves a little bit and say, I wish I was a bit further ahead, or I wish I'd done a bit more. I could do better at this, which is great. But then the good thing about this 2 year cycle is looking back at where you were 2 years ago and thinking, oh, okay, maybe I have improved. maybe I have made progress because when I look at myself 2 years ago, although that only feels like it was a few weeks ago, I'm a completely different person. I mean, look at the photos of us from 2022. You look like a child. I look like I'm 12. Got no facial hair. You've got like a mop on your head, and we just look so young and naive. And to be fair, we pretty much were. To think of how much we've developed and learned about the world and how life works in even the past two-year cycles, the past 4 years is crazy to think of how much knowledge we've gained and how much life experience we've got. And that only excites me for this next 2 year cycle to know that if we're this far ahead now and developed now, again, back to compounding, what has compounded over these years is now just going to allow us to propel to heights that we never even thought was possible over the next 2 years. And that's exciting.
Okay, cool. I would agree with you there, but I would like to know a little bit about your 2 year cycle. Tell us a little bit
Let's get
about
into it.
how how you've evolved in the last 2 years. What have you been like your biggest achievements? What have been your biggest lessons? So share.
I'll say that's crazy because we've actually had like what, a year and a half of a 2 year cycle since the last time we caught up on video. So, man, I forget. So, since we last spoke, you've been to Poland many times. I spent a month in Dubai. I've had a breakup. You've got into a relationship and had a breakup. We, man, where do we even start?
There's a lot that has happened,
So,
very similar things as well.
yeah, I mean, so my past year and a half has entailed pretty much being in the gym every single day. I spent a month in Dubai, which we'll get into in a second. I've been developing as a trader, continuing just my self-improvement journey, which is an accumulation of everything. The gym, trying to get my sleep schedule on lock, becoming more confident and competent as a person, becoming a better trader. And if we're going to start from the beginning, that month in Dubai changed my life purely because it unlocks something in your mind that makes you realize that nothing is impossible. And that sounds really cliche, but until you see it with your own eyes, I think it's hard to actually comprehend. When you're seeing a Lamborghini Huracan and Aventadors as frequently as a Fiesta in the UK, it makes you realize that there's another reality out there. Like we say, yeah, I want to be rich, I want Lambos, I want big houses, but most people never actually experience a reality where that is normal. So it does feel like a distant dream. But when you spend a month in that environment with 50-story buildings surrounding you and supercars driving by, the person in Starbucks is wearing a 300k Richard Mille, a Patek as a equivalent of a citizen in the UK. It really does open your eyes to what is possible in that wealth and this luxury lifestyle of abundance is only not realistic if you're not exposed to it. And that's what I'm excited for you to experience with your move to Warsaw, as we'll obviously get into shortly. But your reality is going to completely open to an abundance of wealth that most people can't comprehend in the small cities that we've always known as where we've grown up. So now I've seen and experienced living in a city like Dubai, I can't ever go back. I can't ever doubt what is possible. All it's made me realize is that whatever my dreams are, first of all, can be achieved, but can also be achieved on a 100x scale. It really makes you realize that you're thinking too small. And it's also made me realize that I thrive in a sunny climate. I got into such a momentum just in that weather and the positive energy. It makes you realize how much the weather really does affect your frequency. And I think it's more just if we're going to get onto the topic of the UK, it's very much a UK thing as well, because I think because the weather here is it's not even the rain, it's just how dull and grey and low vibrational it is here. Because if you think of, for example, a Polish winter is proper winter. You've actually got snow. You've actually got a proper culture. And then you have a good summer. Whereas the UK just feels like a shit, dull winter all the time. So it's not even the rain and the dark that I don't like. It's the fact that it's all the time in the UK and the people are affected by it. But moving away from that, yeah, Dubai was life-changing. And then trading, obviously our last conversation, I was about 10 months into trading. I'm now over 2 years in. I had a little break for the past month because I had a little bit of a bump with my trading, but we're back now. We're back in the markets. It's going good. I've learned so much about myself, so much about the markets, and I'm very proud and excited for where I'm heading in terms of my trading career. And yeah, man, obviously, I'm sure things are going to come up that I can go deeper into as they come up, but enough about me. What about you, my friend? What have you been up to over the last year and a half?
What we'll do is we'll get into a bit about what's happened in the past 2 to 2.5 years in my life. I'll quickly run through that, and then we will both go into what we're working on
The
in the next
future.
2 years and how that's looking. So to start off, about 2.5 years ago, I would have been at Tesco driving,
Yes.
and I was looking to then pursue a career in sales. And to cut a long story short, through a bit of luck, determination, and putting myself out there, I was able to land a pretty good sales job at a high-end watch store, so high-ticket sales. And bearing in mind, I started off with zero experience in sales, nothing at all, no knowledge on how to do it, no knowledge on. I was able to speak to people quite well and get to know people, but that's the only skill that I had, and I knew a little bit about the watches. So I began working, and I was thrown straight into the deep end. So when I was meant to being trained, the person who was responsible for that was away, sadly, on leave, and so I had to essentially pick up, and it wasn't their fault. I had to pick up exactly what I could from the get-go and just
Yeah.
learn from others, which I have learned many times, time and time again, especially even moving to the UK. I was essentially thrown into the deep end when I was in
Yeah.
preschool. Didn't speak a word of the language, and I just had to figure it out. And I did. And it's the same with sales. So throughout the first year of sales, I remember we had been going to MDL Fitness together. That
Yeah.
was quite a good memory. So that was a pretty cool gym that we both went to. And we both decided that we wanted to get into creating content. Now, with different timelines, we've both continued to make content here and there and align our sort of purpose behind that, which is great because I'll still be making content going forward in the near future, and I'll explain a little bit about that as well. But we were going to MDL Fitness, and I think you were in a relationship at the time, I believe, or were you out of the
Yes.
relationship? Yeah.
No, no, yeah, yeah.
So you were in a relationship, and then for me, I wasn't in a relationship. So I thought,
Yeah.
I've worked on myself enough to be able to potentially put myself out there. And towards the end of the year, I decided to enter a relationship. Now, still continuing on to sales, I finished the end of that year on about 350 or 400K in sales in my first year, which put me second place in the whole three shops because we had three different watch boutiques. And as we worked for the same company, we'd all see our sort of like scoreboards. And I was second in place
Yeah.
and about 60K behind the top selling person. So I set myself a target that the next year I will become the top selling person. So roll on a little bit after. Actually, we'll backtrack a little bit before that because I remember I'd gone to Italy at the time. So
Yes.
I went
Yeah.
back to Italy, explored the Dolomites, had a bit of time out there to myself and everything. And that's when I really re-established where I wanted to take the next sort of year because I'd already embedded myself into sales. I was in a sort of good environment in the gym and I was already on a good sort of like step forward. So I thought, okay, what can we now refine? What can we now polish? So I thought, great, I'm good at selling what people want. Now I need to focus on selling what people don't necessarily want, which was the insurance, which they didn't quite understand. Not everyone believes in the insurance, but when you really get into it, it can be sold. And I remember we had this conversation one time
Yeah.
when we were at MDL, and I said, right, I need to focus. I'm good at selling stuff that people want, but a good salesman sells things that people don't necessarily want or don't necessarily need. So
Yeah.
roll on a few months after that, and I was able to become the top selling person for the insurance, for the watches, as I said I would. Now, that year finished around about March, sort of April time. And personally, I wasn't going through the easiest of patches. I think there was probably about a month or two where I had to really look myself in the mirror and go, okay, there's certain things in my life that I need to readjust. There's certain things that I was able to hold myself accountable for before that I didn't now. And I needed to step back into that discipline, which I did. Now, reaching summer, obviously new year for sales, I was able to pick up momentum. So when I say picking up momentum in the new year, I'd gone from going to selling 400K in watches in the previous year, finishing top for insurance sales. And then my goal was now to remain consistent and really push forward. Pushing forward, I was able to consistently hit between 40 to 50K months in sales for my clients, but also sales aside, I was able to create the best client experiences and memorable sort of experience that brought clients back, which at the end of the day, I always said that it's never been about the sales. It's always been about the clients. It's always been about the memories that we
Yeah.
make. It's always been about, at the end of the day, creating a friendship out of that, which I value more than obviously the watches are there. They're there to be sold. That's my job at the end of the day.
Yeah.
However, what's more unique, what's something that you can't buy and what you can't take away from someone is memories. So I focused that in on that, dialed in, and that's how I was able to get those 40 to 50K months. Then come December, I think it slowed down a little bit because the market, with the way the economy was in the UK at the time, wasn't great. So this is December just gone. I was looking at around about 300 to 350K in sales, so similar to last year, but in terms of market conditions that were not stable at the time. They weren't as promising as the year before. So I was still doing well. I was doing far better if you think about it in an unstable market compared
Yeah.
to a stable one, which also says a lot
100%.
about my ability to adapt, pivot, and become a better salesman in different conditions, which I'm very proud of. Now, an opportunity came about in December where we had an opportunity to create a VIP client experience and event for our top spending clients and our closest clients for the boutique. Now, I organized the majority of the watches, the setup, the contact with the clients that we had, inviting them in and so forth. And at the time, we were also expecting a visit on that day from some very important people within the brand that I was working for to basically run the event with us and bring a couple things to show the clients how the watches work and how they're made and so forth. Now, I was fortunate enough on the event to sell a few times, and I thought I would take the opportunity to ask one of these people to see if there was any further opportunities available within the company, and especially within the sort of like realm of going to Poland and doing it in Poland, in my home country. Now, Poland has always been the biggest dream of mine to move back to.
Yeah.
It's my home country. I love it beyond anything else. And it's just, I can't say enough good about it. And I'm sure everyone that's seen stuff on the internet about Poland knows how great it is. So I thought, okay, I said, the value that I provided for the company so far, I'm really proud of, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. However, I feel like I've got to a point where I'd like to apply the same skills and apply the same magic that I'm able to provide for the experiences for the clients back in my home country if there is an opportunity. And they said they'll take that into consideration and they would let me know. Now, fast forward to the beginning of this year, I was fortunate enough to get an interview in Warsaw for the flagship boutique in Poland, which is a big step from a small boutique in a shopping mall. So it's a massive step forward. It's one of my dreams come true, a dream that if anyone knows me personally, they know that I always mention it at least 5 to 10 times a month, and I have done for the past 5 years. So it's something that's very, very important to me. And here I am now in Poland, currently in the process of making the move to Warsaw, which excites me beyond belief. I'm also a little bit nervous because it's new beginnings. It's moving out for the first time. It's moving to a capital city. It's a responsibility of representing the brand the same way that I did, if not better, when I was in England. And it's also holding myself accountable to the standards that I've raised for myself, but also the people who have believed in me along the journey. So, with a lot of pride, I take that responsibility onto myself, and we'll see how much success it brings along with me. Now, as many successful people say, to be able to achieve the success that you want, sometimes, or even more than sometimes, you have to make certain sacrifices in life. Now, as you mentioned, I had gotten into a relationship about a year and a few months ago. And that was my first time getting into a relationship in a while because I wanted to put myself out there. I wanted to see if I was able to be as competent and as good of a partner as I should be. Now, unfortunately, with the move to Poland, it is quite a demanding move for both myself and my previous partner. And
Of
what
course.
what obviously I had to do, which wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to do, was to say that it would not be able to sort of like ways, our future paths would not be able to align. Sadly, even though as much as we wanted it, it's something that we had to sit down and say that this is the fact of the matter. And unfortunately, I've got a dream to chase. I've got to put myself first. I know it's going to be very egotistical, but sometimes you have to do that to be able to achieve the dreams that you've always wanted to do. Now, there are lessons that you learn from that, from relationships, from how relationships end, and so forth. And I take that on with pride because I learned myself that there are certain things that I need to improve for my next relationship, as I'm sure you've probably learned as well, and everyone has as well. It's the way we communicate. Obviously, us guys, we aren't, I wouldn't say the best at putting things in an understandable way, in the way that we would like to be understood sometimes. We, we,
Guilty.
we can be quite black and white. And that's where the self awareness comes in, when we can be quite brutal, we can be quite black and white. And in the moment, that's the only thing that we can see is the right way forward. And that's the right way that we can explain how we feel without actually, clicking back into reality and going, hold on a minute, this person doesn't really deserve being spoken to in that way. We could have rephrased it. We could have said it in a different way to make them understand. And that's a lesson that we learn along the way, that it's something that we can, that's one lesson that I've learned personally from it, is something where I've got two important things, one on this side and then one on that side, where I'm having to pick between the two, which I, in a perfect world, wouldn't want to. But then you realize that
Yeah,
when you weigh those
that's
options up,
life.
you just have to sort of like make certain decisions. And then when you look back at the mistakes that you made, you take them on the chin and go, okay, and apologize for them. You take accountability and you sit with yourself and learn to then go into the next relationship with a more healthy outlook and not make those same mistakes as you did before. So it's a learning experience that I take on proudly. I obviously wish the other person the best in life because they do deserve it. They're a good person. And yeah, it's just at the end of the day, two people with two different life purposes that aren't fully aligned at the moment in time. It's something that did come about quite abruptly, as opposed to my move to Poland. And yeah, that's just how things go. And yeah, that's pretty much where we are now. I am currently in my transition to move to Warsaw, which is exciting. Like I said, I've got a few things planned which I'll be doing on the side. So obviously I'll be doing my sales in the boutique, but also to get myself ahead and achieving my next goal in life, which is to start my own business and become self-reliant. That's my next goal, and that's what I'll be chasing after going forward. So back over to you.
Amazing. Amazing. Now, you mentioned what you learned from your mistakes and the things that went wrong in that. But I'm interested, what do you feel for your first time in a relationship after, I want to say, was it 7 years? Your
Yeah, it's
first
about six,
time
7 years.
as a young adult in a relationship. What did you learn about yourself that surprised you that you actually did well?
That's actually a good question. So I think there's quite a few things that I can probably list off, but the main thing is I think you have to have more, like people need to have more self-belief in them, because I always thought that, I had been told that dating in your teens is different to dating in your 20s and then dating in your 30s and et cetera, et cetera. And I do agree. I can see it.
Mm,
But what I always worried about was how much I can deliver in an affectionate way. How much can I put my own ego to one side, but also make the other person
yeah.
happy? Now, I was able to do that to a degree. Obviously, things started to get a little bit turbulent as the move to Poland happened, which I wasn't able to deliver in the way that I had delivered before, which I acknowledge.
Mm,
But the learning from that is when you do love someone, you can show up for them, and you can show up in multiple ways that other people haven't before, which I was able to do. And I'm very grateful for that we could experience those memories together and that I could prove to my partner, but also myself, that I was able to take care of them in the way that they needed and the way that made both of us happy. But then on the flip side, the ego part, that's one thing that unfortunately a lot of us men do need to work on, including myself, where we tend to think certain things or make certain assumptions, which then over a long period of time, when we make those assumptions, lead to us believing that that is reality, which isn't always the case and can mislead us, causing us to then
mm,
cause hurt and damage to the other person. So, and that's where what I've understood is you need to be better at communicating those doubts, be better at communicating those thoughts as soon as they arise, as opposed to dwelling on them and then essentially creating an ultimatum on what you've decided is the correct version of reality. Because one, that's not you being in touch with, how you feel. It's not about, being, going to your partner and saying, oh, but I feel upset, or this, that, the other, or breaking down, or that's not masculine at all. Like, you have to be able to sit down and say, look, these are the thoughts that are going through my head. I don't like these thoughts. Can we talk about them and just talk through them, as opposed to fight against each other or blame each other or assume things that aren't necessarily true. So that's the other part. That's the latter part of the
yeah,
equation that I learned in terms of the lesson. So there's both good lessons and bad lessons that you learn,
of course.
which, yeah, that's probably what I would say is the main thing that I was able to get out, was I was able to deliver in the way that I'd always wanted to deliver for that person in a positive way. But I'd also had a chance to learn a lot about myself and how
Yeah.
certain ways that I go about life may not always be correct.
Yeah, no, I can relate to a lot of that. I experienced very similar things, very much. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I was a terrible communicator. A lot of the times simply because, well, it goes back to ego, doesn't it? I don't like to explain myself a lot of the times. I'm sure you're the same. And I become very impatient when it's things to do with myself. A little bit the same where it came to you moving to Poland. I was just in a stage of my life where my goals and my vision for my life was more of a priority than anybody else in my life. And sometimes you just have to pick and choose. But that's what's great about life, is every experience, good or bad, is a lesson. And there's good and bad to come out of any situation. And I mean, that's the beauty of life. Now, one thing I'm also interested in, having gone for a breakup and moving back to your home country in the space of 6 months, what would you say is the biggest thing you've learned about yourself with going through all of that in such a cramped period of time?
I'd say it's definitely a shock to the system,
Mm,
especially when it's something that you don't want to do, that you do see a future, you plan a future with this person in your country and everything like that. It is like I said, it's a big commitment. It's a big challenge for both people. And I think you've got to have the humility and self-awareness to understand that although you may want it, the other person may not want it as much as you. They might want it, but not on the same time frame as you. And it
Yeah.
goes back to, like you said, putting yourself first and being more sort of concerned about what you feel is your priority and what's right for you. And yeah, instinctively, you will put yourself first. You'll think selfishly and you'll think, okay, these are the things that are working in my
Sorry,
favor.
my
These are,
camera cut out.
that's right. I'll keep yapping. But yeah, so you sort of like lay it out like I did. I laid out the pros and the cons, and I said, look, short term, if you think about it, it's going to feel good. It's going to feel like, yeah, you've still got that person. They're supporting you. Obviously, they're on the other side of the continent, but they're still there.
Mm.
However, long term, if you think about the commitment on the other person's side, because yes, I may have the fluency in both languages, Polish and English. Yes, I may have the opportunity to have a job here and, you know, a pretty decent job as well and an opportunity to progress in my career. However, this person, you've got to think on their side as well. You got to think that short term, yes, it'll be good. Okay, it'll be difficult in terms of emotions because you're so far away from each other. However, long term, how does that look for both of you? How does it look in terms of their progression towards your goal to being with you? Because you may have made
Yeah.
the move, but you can't put the same expectations on the other person, which I did. I'd put the
Of course.
expectation of, okay, I'm moving here and I need you here by this time, learning the language or at least compatible in the language and having this career, having this job for us to be able to work, which in hindsight wasn't necessarily fair on the other person because I could have been more considerate. But then again, there were certain aspects which would have made me believe that and also make the decision that I had made. But you've also got to consider what I have to consider now is the fact that although love is great, love is an amazing feeling, and the memories that you make with a person are special. Unfortunately, the brutal truth in adult lifehood is when you've got a partner and you've got certain expectations for them, which for me were to be able to stand by my side, fight, and fight for a better life, and both improve, self improve, and both motivate each other. Sadly, love isn't enough. And those certain things for that person to be able to show up in the way that you want need to be there. And if you don't see them, or if you don't see that potential due to actions or how long it's taken or so forth, that's when you start to lay out the cards and you go, hold on a minute, with my future in plan, how much drive I've got, how much discipline I've got, is this person going to be able to keep up? Will it be fair for them?
Yeah. Hmm.
And I made the mistake of basically making an ultimatum, like I said, you either stick to this or you don't. But what I've learnt now is you can't change people. As much as you want to
No.
change someone to be on the same wavelength as you, everyone has their own life. Everyone has their own goals. Everyone has their own way of seeing life, depending on how they grew up, their personal experiences, their personal goals in life, and so forth. And it would be unfair for me to change a person to suit my needs based on what I want in the future and based on what I require from them, because that person could be better suited to someone else who is more aligned to them,
Yeah.
as opposed to me, who I could probably find a person who is as disciplined, is as focused, is as like 100% all the time, and has
Of
similar
course.
goals. So yeah, that's what I've learned in the last sort of like few months,
Nice.
following that breakup and obviously the move, because there's a lot of stuff going on for me.
Absolutely.
It's not like it's obviously I'm sat here and I'm just sort of like head in the clouds, everything's going to be okay. There's a lot of logistical aspects I need to sort about the move. There's obviously being able to find a place out there and so forth. And I think, yeah, it's just at the end of the day, following the decision I had to make, you have to really say to yourself, like, you could have been better at communicating certain things, and maybe that would have made a change. Maybe that would have helped that person realize that they actually are supported in that process and make them believe it a little bit more, which might have been the case, but also that you can't change someone. Now,
No.
the last thing that I will say on top of that is, although you can't change someone to accustom to your needs and your dreams, what you can do is you can ask them if that is something that they want. Because if you ask them often enough and you check in with them, you'll be able to find out for yourself whether that is or not. And I think that's what most people our age need to realize as well, is you need to be very honest. You need to be very upfront and
Yeah.
say, look, you can love someone as much as you want. You can have the best time together. You can make the best memories and have the best connection. But if you're not honest to that person, even if you know deep down that you can't do something, or it's going to be difficult for you, regardless of obviously whether you've got family, this, that, the other, and so forth. If there's certain priorities that matter to you more, you have to make that clear.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Great explanation. And also a great experience. And to go back to your point about not being able to change people, one of the things that the sort of concept that I'd always hear people talking about in regards to relationships as I was growing up was, if you and your partner want to work, you need to be willing to change to meet the other's needs. And as I've grown up and gone through my own experiences, I completely reject that idea. And I now say that people don't need to change. You just need to find someone who you align with. It's very simple. Two people don't need to change who they are to become compatible. You're either compatible or you're not. Yes, you're going to need to work through things as they come up to ensure that you have a stable, good relationship. But I think rather than people having to change, you just need to look harder and longer to find the right person that you're aligned with deeply in your souls. You don't need to change to make a relationship right with somebody. You just need to find the right person. And out of the 80 billion people on earth, they're out there. The right person for you is out there. And the right man for any girl is out there. But you shouldn't have to change who you are. And a girl shouldn't have to change who they are to come up to your standard.
Yeah.
And that's something you can only learn through experience. I think that's why so many relationships don't work, is because people get into relationships so easily. And then when they eventually get so far on to the point where you realize deep down that you're not compatible, you try and do everything that you can to make it work, but it's not going to work because you're just not aligned. And it's taken you that time to realize that. And that's why I think so many relationships don't work, because we've talked about this in depth recently. I think people's vetting process before getting into a relationship with somebody isn't deep enough. And again, that's only something you can learn through experience. And that's why I don't think there's such thing as a bad experience, no matter how bad it feels in the moment. Because without going through these experiences, you won't know what it's like or what you need to know in order to be better going into the future. So now with these experiences, you can only be a better partner for your future partner. And we know what to look out for. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'll hit back on that a little bit because I think both can be true at the same time now that I reflect on it. I think realistically, mostly that is the truth, that you should look for someone who you are naturally aligned with spiritually and in terms of values and so forth. But what I will say is both can be true at the same time, because you can meet that person who is spiritually aligned, emotionally aligned, and so forth. But you can also change in that time. You can also show up for that person in certain ways. So, say for example, it's the gym, something very simple, or running, or something about exercise. Say this person is into a certain different type of exercise, and then they meet you, and say for example you're into volleyball, and they naturally go, actually, I'm interested in your hobby, I'd like to take part. And that's a beautiful thing, because you can change in certain ways. Like, it's not big ways that you have to change in, but it really depends on the person and their willingness to do so. So I do fully agree about the vetting process, like we spoke about. You should take more caution in terms of the dating process, the finding out about, obviously, this person's values, what's important to them, what they deem as morally good, morally bad in a variety of different situations and life situations, but also their family as well, their family dynamic, how, you know, their parents are to them, how their relationship with their parents is, and how their relationship with their siblings are, or their friends, and so forth. And then that gives you a bit of a better picture of who that person will be in the future, because
Yeah.
psychology does often say that we do, as much as people like to disagree, we do take a lot of our own behaviors away from the household that we were raised in. So we will often apply what we've seen in our childhood and gone, this is the correct way to behave, because we're constantly around that. And whether it's right or wrong, that's subjective, but also that's what you learn. And unfortunately, that's the way of life. And you can change it depending on what mindset you have. But if you don't question it yourself, then those habits are going to stay, those thought processes, the way you deal with certain things are going to stay naturally. So it is important to vet certain aspects of that person, and it goes for both. It goes for both the girl and the guy. You both have to look at each other and go, first of all, okay, they can make me feel great, they can look great, you know, we can have very similar talking points, but at the end of the day, is that really enough to build that foundation and that longevity over time for that pure connection between a man and a woman, where you're meant to both support each other and essentially live for each other, to be able to help each other in the best way, to then be able to build a family, and then hopefully at the end of the day still be together with each other into old age. So that's what I think is important, is that you both have to look at each other's upbringings, you both have to look at each other's aspirations, goals. Um, you know, some people think, you know, political standpoint is very important. Some people
Mm,
think it's less important. For me and for you, I know it is, I wouldn't say it's extremely important, but it is important for us to know where this person lies and what they agree with, what certain issues are good issues and bad issues, and so forth. And yeah, and even just sort of like in a societal way, what are good behaviors and what are bad behaviors, what are bad habits,
yeah.
what are bad sort of like activities, what are good activities, and you sit down over the span of a few dates, hopefully, in different scenarios. This is what I would do, so I'd be curious to see what you think, but this is what I would do going forward, is I would extend the dating process a little bit longer, to be able
Yeah.
to really vet this person out and see how they are in different situations. So, you know, standard date, you'd first date, you'd go for a coffee and a walk or something like that, just to really break the ice, just to see how they are. Then maybe do an activity based thing, maybe do something like a volunteering based thing in the third date, and just put yourself in as many different scenarios that you can to find out what this person feels like in this scenario. Do they agree with it? What are their opinions? And then off the back of that, you'll be able to get a general sort of grasp of how they see the world and how they see their future. Now, the most important part of that would be, for me, is when you do eventually go through the trials and tribulations of the dating process and you do feel like you're a great match for this person, equally, you have to then commit to meeting their parents and seeing what their parents are like, obviously finding out what they feel is important in life and how they've lived their life, and so forth. And getting to know them as people is very important, because you will often see traits of certain people in, obviously, their children. So, you know, I've got certain habits that I carry from my parents. You've got certain habits that you carry from your parents. And then at that point, you can then agree or disagree to continue dating or whatnot, because I feel like that would be the most sensible way, where you're not leading someone on, but you're also being very clear of what you expect and what is right for you. And if it's not something that aligns with you, then I feel like the most respectful way is to basically say that, you know, this is something that I've enjoyed spending time with you and everything like that, but I just don't feel like this is right for me, based on my values and what's important in life and my projections of what I want in the future. And then politely thank them for the memories that you've made, and then allow
Yeah.
them to find the next person that is more suited to them.
And again, that is a valuable experience. And to just touch on one of the main points there, that we've previously mentioned, which is something that I've never done before, but something that I certainly want to do. That is meeting parents before you commit to actually getting into a relationship with somebody. I think that's quite important. But to not have this roll on forever, I think one of the points that I thought about there, which is something that I want to touch on quickly, is about in life, you obviously, you say that you have a willingness to learn. But I think when we think of characteristics that we have based off our parents and just from people that we've been around our whole life, one thing that I thought about recently is the willingness to unlearn as well. Think about how many characteristics or behaviors people have that have been ingrained in them by no choice of their own, but it's just what they've grown up around, and habits or behaviors that they think is normal, but they know aren't very good, but they're just so ingrained into who you are that there's a lot that most young adults, as they become more into adulthood and more independent, how much we actually have to unlearn, whether that be chatting back to people when you disagree with something, or not being able to take accountability when you're in the wrong. So many things that are normal to you, but behaviors that you start to identify that you don't like, and having the unwillingness to say, I need to unlearn certain behaviors so that I can get closer to who I really want to become. And I think so many people don't have the humility to say, there are things that I do that I know I don't like, but I'm just so used to doing them that I'm just gonna, it's me now. Instead of saying, no, there's things about me that I do and say that I don't want to do anymore. So I need to unlearn these things. I need to unprogram some things. I think people become so set and identifying themselves as, this is just who I am. My mum was like this when I was younger. My dad used to do this when I was younger. It's just how I am. And people don't seem to have a willingness to unlearn bad habits or behaviors that will help them become more aligned with who they really want to become. But I think we could sit down and talk about that for hours. So we'll just touch the surface on that one. But man, in terms of the future, obviously, I'm continuing to double down on trading, going to continue staying consistent with the gym. Obviously, gym's not my number one priority. It's more of just a discipline that I keep up with daily. Trading, we're both going to get back on our content. It's funny, when I feel like whenever you drop off, I drop off, and when I drop off, you drop off. And then when one of us says, I'm getting back on it again, the other one goes, fuck, well, I can't not now. We always seem to fluctuate with our commitment to content. I mean, I've been uploading every couple of weeks, more long form for, well, this whole year, to be honest. Obviously, I got back into the flow when I was in Dubai in January. Not so much on the short form, but I've been liking doing my vlogs and just the longer form. Obviously, we've reignited our fire for content again when we're back on this podcast. But for me, trading, gym, summer's coming around the corner now, so it's going to be more traveling content. Now for you, obviously, you've made the move. You're in Poland. You're going to start posting content when you're over there. So for me, trading, gym, content. For you, sales, content, obviously gym. There's an exciting future ahead of us over the next year or two. And we're going to keep up with this on a weekly basis, Lord willing. And I think this would be a good place to wrap this one up, so that on the next one, we've got plenty of good topics to talk about. I feel like this first episode was just a good opportunity for us to catch up with what we've been up to over the past year and a half, so that the next coming podcast, we can get deep into any of the random topics that we usually talk about, whether that be psychology, business, all of the random shit that we end up talking about. We'll get into the good conspiracy stuff, talk about how the people in the Artemis rocket now aren't in the moon, they're in a studio behind a green screen, and we'll talk about all that juicy stuff. But I think it's been great to reflect on the past year and a half since we last did a podcast. We've come a long way, and it's very exciting to see where we're heading in the future, and we'll talk about that shortly. Is there anything else you want to finish up on?
No, that's pretty much it. I think we've covered every single topic that we can. It's a good way to touch base on our experiences and the lessons that we've learned. And I think the most important thing that we can take away from this podcast, and what everyone else can take away that has tuned in and listened, and hopefully they've enjoyed it, is the fact that we are humans at the end of the day. We do make mistakes, and
Every day is a
yeah,
learning day.
it is a learning day every day, and you've got to, even in the hardest of times, when you disappoint people, when you hurt people, you've got to then look yourself in the mirror and go, respectively Yaz, respectively Jack, look, what can I do better in the future to be a better human being for myself and a better human being for other people? And I think that's the most important thing for a man, is the ability to look yourself in the mirror and realize where you've gone wrong. And most
Yeah.
importantly, is to take note of that and take actionable steps to improve that in the future. So that's what I'll finish off with.
Accountability is so important. And I think it's knowing that it's inevitable to let people down and disappoint people. It's inevitable that you're going to be let down and disappointed by people. But it's how you react to that, how you control your state of mind, and how you perceive things and take action on it, knowing that it's going to benefit you in the future, and being able to take that accountability for your own actions in everything in life as a young male, because life's never going to be smooth sailing. So it's how you deal with it. I think that's a great way to end it. Yaz, it's been a fucking pleasure. And we will catch up
Likewise.
with the audience shortly.
Yeah, possibly next week.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.